Now let's dive into the formulas and functions and Excel tools that we'll be using in preparing the prepayment models. These formulas and functions are critical to our model preparation, and I will not be going in very much detail of this formula and function explanation since this is not a Excel formula and function course. But I will give you a brief introduction of these formulas and you will understand how I'm going to be using the same in preparing a prepayment model. So the first category of functions are date functions. So first function is date function itself. Date function returns the sequential serial number that represents particular date. The syntax for date function is year, month and day. All three parameters are compulsory. Year argument is required. The value of year argument can include 1 or 4 digits. Excel interprets the year argument according to the date system of your computer. By default, Excel for Windows uses 1900 date system, which means the first date is 1st January 1900. Second argument is required, which is month. It can be a positive or negative integer number. That means you cannot put decimals in that. It represents the month of the year, which is from 1 to 12, so January to December. Day argument, it is required. It's a positive or negative integer number, so it cannot be a decimal. It represents day of the month from 1st to 31st. Now let's see some practical example and understand this date function in action in Microsoft Excel. So let's go through the practical example for the date function. As I mentioned before, date function requires 3 arguments which all are compulsory. So year, month and day. So here in this example, I have 3 arguments, year, month and day already put in the cells. Now let's start with the practical example for the date function. As I mentioned before, date function requires 3 arguments, year, month and day. All these 3 arguments are compulsory. Now I have mentioned few example year, month and day arguments in column B, C and D. Now let's put this formula in column F is equal to date. I'll hit tab. I will select year. I will select month and day. I will close the parentheses and hit enter. Now as you can see, the date is 31st January 2010. You can always format this cell and display of the date according to your wish. So I have mentioned 31st Jan 2010, which is the way I want it. You can always put this 3 arguments manually like this: 2010, 1 and 31st. It will give you same result. So it depends how you want to use the formula, and everybody has his own needs. But if you are a pro Excel user, you will always use some cells as a reference because you want to use these formulas dynamically. But in some instances you might have to use direct feed in as arguments, and it depends on how you want to use the formula. So now let's go through a second example, which is 10, 5, 2, which is year is 10, month is 5 and day is 2. So since there is no year mentioned here, it is 1910 or 2010, we don't know. So let's see how date function will work in this scenario. So I will give formula in F12 again, date, hit enter. I will select the year as 10, month as 5 and day as 2. I will hit enter again and I'll get 2nd May 1910. So in this case, Excel assumes that the year argument was for 1910 as it starts from 1900 as I mentioned before. So if you want this particular date for the 21st century, which is 2000 and above, you have to specifically mention the year with 4-digit letter. So in this case, we should have mentioned 2010 as we did in row 11. Otherwise, Excel will assume that it is for 1900. Similarly, if I just copy and paste formula down, it will assume that 2 is for 1902 and not 2002. Now you can always use other formulas inside this particular date formula. So for year, you can use other formulas as well. So there is also a formula called year. You can use that or any other formula to derive this particular number dynamically. We will be using similar kind of formula in our prepayment model preparation, and I will show you how to use that when we prepare the model. So this was the brief introduction for the date function. It uses 3 arguments, year, month and day, and it has to be integer numbers, and it can be used dynamically with other functions as well. So let's see another functions called end of the month in the next section. Thank you for watching.